welcome to another video, and this is kind of like my first ever sit down video. But today I kind of wanted to go over and talk with you guys about some of my experiences as well as advice and tips on the IB program, since I have done it and I just finished this year. So yeah. To give a little bit of context, I'm part of the May 2022 group and I took the exam route. So I did most of my exams in May. The three higher level subjects that I took were HL Chemistry, HL Biology, and HL English. And the three SL courses, or standard level classes, that I took were SL French, SL Econ, and SL Math Analysis and Approaches. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go over some general advice and guidance in the beginning, and then later on I'm gonna kind of delve off into sort of the more specific subjects that I took, as well as three other aspects of the IB program, which are CAS, TOK, and the EE, which is the extended essay. But yeah, I definitely won't be able to cover everything in this video because I'm gonna try to make it concise. If you have any additional questions, just comment it down below and I will try my best to answer them. Oh, and also two more things. One is I'll leave a bunch of helpful links down below in the description, and there you can find different resources and practice papers that I personally think is really useful. And secondly, the advice and kind of tips that I compiled for this video are, I try to make them not super generic, and I try to make them pretty unique and specifics, because I feel that these are the tips that will be the most successful in helping you accomplish what you want throughout the program. So let's just begin with the general section. First thing I want to talk about is the IB syllabus. I would definitely recommend you to look at the syllabus right at the beginning or when you're studying for IB exams, because the syllabus is what IB will actually test you on. Because I realized that during school, a lot of the teachers might teach additional content or content that's not part of the syllabus. So when you're actually studying for IB exams, you don't really want to study for additional content that you don't really need for the exams, because there's already a lot of content that you have to cover for the exams. So by looking at the syllabus, you'll be able to see the content and the information that you really have to study for and learn, and those will be the content that you will be tested on. Another important thing is to save your grade 11 notes and tests. This is super important because different schools do it differently, but for my school, I had a lot of my exams during my second year of IB, so in my grade 12 year. So my grade 12 courses were essentially just a continuation of my grade 11 courses. When you're actually taking your IB tests, you'll be tested on both content from your grade 12 and grade 11 years as well. Some people throw their notes out, and then if you don't have your grade 11 notes, you're kind of just missing half the content. So it's really important to save your notes. Finally, one last thing is when you're studying for your IB exams, which I would recommend you do around 1.5 months before your actual exams, make sure to do practice exams and to look over practice papers, because you can see sort of how the exam is formatted. Sometimes certain questions might be reused, or they might be really similar, might appear on your exam. So for example, for my bio exam, some of the multiple choice questions were just repeats of past papers. So those are kind of just easy marks for me. Down below in the description, I'll link a couple of websites that have practice papers that you can kind of look over, and these were the practice papers that I used, so I found them to be really useful. So yeah, I hope that those help you as well. Okay, now we're gonna move on to sort of the subject specific tips and advice. So I will start off with HL Chemistry. So something that I think is super important for HL Chemistry is to fully understand your grade 11 concepts, because those are sort of the foundation for everything else that carries onwards. And in grade 12, you'll need to use a lot of the grade 11 concepts as a basis towards understanding more complex problems. Something else that is super important that a lot of people overlook is significant figures or significant digits. These are so important for chemistry. You'll have to like really understand and familiarize yourself with significant figures. During the exams, you would need to write your final answer in accordance with significant figures, and even if you get the right answer but your like significant figures are wrong, then you essentially don't get the mark because IB doesn't give half marks. Make sure you really review your significant figures and understand how it works. And finally, something else to keep in mind is to be concise in your answers when you're writing your exam or when you're writing any sort of test. For these exams, there's a mark scheme for each question. So even if you write a lot, if your answer doesn't match up with the mark scheme, you won't be able to receive the marks. This is really important to remember because you don't want to be writing like unnecessary information, and that will cut away a lot of time when you're writing your exam. So it's really important to be clear and concise and to not include that much filler information. And this applies for HL Bio as well, which I will be covering next. Okay, so for HL Bio, one thing to keep in mind is that there is a lot of information that you'll have to learn, and it's not all about memorizing. It's understanding how your body and how certain systems, for example, work together. One thing that I like to do is to make diagrams whenever I could to like understand certain information better. I think this is especially helpful if you're a visual learner, but even if you're not, I think it's still really helpful to like visually see how everything works together. So for example, when you're learning about the circulatory system, you might want to look up a diagram that kind of shows how your blood circulates out of your heart and into like different parts of the body and how it comes back. You'll be able to understand it a lot better by looking at a diagram rather than just like reading notes off of a slide without any sort of pictures or diagrams. Something else that is quite useful is to use acronyms because it can help you kind of retain some of the information a lot better. So for example, one of the components of the syllabus for HL Bio is to list out the different functions of membrane proteins. I created an acronym which was we can identify cellular components professionally. I don't know why I came up with that. It was like the first thing that popped up into my mind, so yeah, but each letter basically corresponds to one of the functions of membrane proteins. For example, the H corresponds to hormone binding sites, the C corresponds to cell adhesion, and so on and so forth. Most content you'll be tested on, yes, you'll need to like understand how everything works, but there are some information that you kind of have to memorize. Like for example, you'd have to be able to list certain functions out, and these, I think the best way would be to use acronyms so it'll be easier for you to attain and apply during your exam. Last thing, when you're studying for the exam, I think it's really important to spend more time on the chapters with more information. So for example, systems is a really big part of the IB syllabus. I think it's one of the more hefty sections. I think it's more important to kind of focus more on the sections with more information because those tend to appear more frequently on the IB exams. The bigger sections would be more important for you to fully understand in order to do good on the exams. Okay, now I'm gonna move on to HL English. Something super important is to learn how to write a commentary in the beginning because that is basically what your final exam is. It's just you writing 2 commentaries. During school, you're gonna have to like write a lot of commentaries as well. I think you should get this foundation down as soon as possible. In the description, I'm gonna link a couple links that are really useful in understanding what a commentary is and how to write one. Also, I think it's really important to review your literary devices and to kind of have like a few literary devices that you have under your belts. Whenever you analyze quotes, you'll be able to comment on the literary device and kind of like how it influences the events that occur in your quote and how it supports your topic and what you're commenting about. And one last thing is to practice brainstorming in a specific amount of time because when you're writing your exam, you basically have 2 hours and 15 minutes to write 2 commentaries, which is not a lot of time, and you'd have to manage your time really well. You don't have a lot of time to think and brainstorm what you want to talk about. I suggest you to practice brainstorming and coming up with a thesis and 3 arguments as soon as possible so you're not kind of just like staring down at your paper when you're writing your exam. Okay, now we're going to move on to the SL topics. So first is math SL. For this, I really don't have that much like advice. I think the biggest thing is repetition. So before your exam, do a lot of practice papers because I honestly think that's like the best way to to figure out how the math exam works and to understand the concepts and how to do certain problems. Yeah, also a lot of the concepts and methods that you have to use are very similar across all of the math papers. So by doing math papers, you'll be able to kind of familiarize yourself with the method, and when you're writing your actual exam, it'll be easier for you to understand the question and to figure out what it's asking for. So next is econ SL. So for this course, I think the textbook is pretty useful when you want to understand all of the material that you need. Like normally I wouldn't suggest you to just read the textbook, but for econ I think it's a bit different because I think the textbook is pretty useful. And also one more thing is to practice drawing diagrams because for econ a lot of it is about like drawing and analyzing diagrams, and each diagram is kind of different for different scenarios. So just familiarize yourself with all of the diagrams. The diagrams that you need should all be in your textbook. Another thing is that there are basically different scenarios and situations that occur in economics. For example, you have like indirect taxes, so the increase of an indirect tax, or subsidies. For each of these scenarios, I would suggest you to jot down some ideas for what you would want to write and include during your answer. So for example, you might include the stakeholders affected, like the people affected, and any short and long-term implications for each scenario. There are several main scenarios. As long as you kind of know what you're going to talk about for each generic scenario, then it'll help you a lot when you're actually writing your exam, and it'll actually save you a lot of time in thinking about what you want to write. Okay, lastly we have French SL. For this course I actually finished it in grade 11. In grade 11, because of COVID, we went down the non-exam route, so I only took the oral test and I didn't take the written test. But for the oral test, I think it's so important to practice speaking orally, because I think actually talking is the only way that you'll be able to become a better speaker in French. And also watching certain videos in French was really helpful for me as well, because this basically helps you familiarize yourself with listening to other people speak French, and you're also able to kind of learn from them and to listen to their pronunciation. This will improve both your listening and oral speaking skills. And one more thing is to review your conjugation, because I think that's going to be really important when you're actually talking and doing the written portion as well. I think conjugation is a really big part of the French language, and you have to be able to know how to conjugate each word in the different tenses, such as present, past, future. There's a lot more, but I'm just stating the most basic ones. Okay, I've been talking a lot, but that's all of the subject specific tips and advice that I have. I'm gonna move on to like the final part of the IB program, which basically includes TOK, CAS, and the EE. So starting off with TOK, this is basically kind of similar to a philosophy course. You kind of reflect and question on everything that you think you know, and everything just becomes really confusing. I don't know, I was just very confused during the course. But so in TOK, there's two assignments that you have to do. One is the internal assessment, where you basically choose like a TOK prompt, and you choose 3 objects, and you basically kind of comment on the object and how it relates to the prompt. If you're confused about that, I'm gonna link a website that includes all of the prompts that you can choose from, and I'll also link a couple of sample TOK IAs. And the second part of TOK is your essay. So this is also where you basically choose one of the 6 questions given by TOK, and the questions are different every single year, I think. And then you basically write an essay that comments on the prompts. You essentially give your stand, but you also comment on both perspectives of the prompt. Next up we have CAS, and this basically stands for creativity, activity, and service. One thing I would suggest is to not do all of it at once, and to kind of regularly update your CAS. You have to write and complete a certain amount of reflections and activities. It's a pretty time-consuming process to do all of this. Don't procrastinate. And for me, I procrastinated, and in the end I had to spend a long time writing all my reflections, and it just took quite some time. Okay, finally we have the EE, which is the extended essay, and this is basically where you write a maximum 4,000 word essay on sort of any topic that you would like. This essay is pretty open-ended, so it might seem very daunting at first. What I would suggest is to look at past extended essays and see how the essays are formatted. So that might give you like a bit of inspiration on what topic you want to write about and how you would want to sort of present your essay. A personal advice that I would give is to, one, either write an essay on a topic that's not super confusing, that's relatively easy to understand because it'll save you a lot of time, or two, write about something that you're actually really interested about, even though it might be sort of more complicated or difficult. I mean, you can have best in both worlds where you have something you're really interested about and it's relatively easy to write about. But for me, I decided to go for something that I was interested about. So I wrote about gut health and how different macronutrients affect the gut microbiome. But this is really confusing for me. In the end, it took me a lot of time to kind of understand the information because it was all really complex. So I low-key regretted picking this topic. Unless you're really passionate about it, my advice would be to choose something that you like, but also choose something that is not super hard to understand and to write about. So yeah, that wraps it up. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. But yeah, honestly, I think that people make it seem harder than it looks. I think that as long as you put in the effort, then you'll do okay. Then you'll do good. But yeah, to all of you guys doing IB, good luck to you. I wish you the best. And once again, let me know if you have any questions. Put them in the comments and I will answer them. And since I'm going to uni soon, I'm going to UCLA. I'm definitely gonna document a lot of my university life, and feel free to subscribe because I'll definitely be posting more study content there. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day. You're probably gonna break my heart.